obviously I didn't dress for this one. Cheers. My first experience with ultra marathoning. Now, in the last video, I mentioned that I started becoming interested after connecting with Paul Terranova and seeing his exploits with the Grand Slam and the Kona in the same year, and I started training in earnest for the October 2013. I mistakenly said 2014 in the last video. It was the 2013 North Face Endurance Challenge just outside of Madison, Wisconsin, along much of the Ice Age Trail, and I was really excited about getting to this particular race. I had signed up for the 50K. On the airplane, literally on the airplane, I started thinking about, well, maybe I should switch to the 50 miler. I mean, 50K, 50 miles, it's only, around 18 miles difference, no big deal, right? And I went to the packet pickup and actually asked if I could switch to the 50 miler, and they said, oh, absolutely, just pay the extra $15 and you're in. So I switched from the 50K to the 50 miler. Now I realized I'd never run either of those distances before. In training, I'd covered 30 miles a couple of times, but never in a race. And so I was in for a different experience, to be sure. And I went to bed excited, got to the race super early. The race started at, I'm pretty sure it was 5 a.m. It was really early the next morning, on Saturday morning. And I settled into a respectable pace with several other runners, and I remember at mile 14 I had a few stomach issues, so stopped and went to the restroom and kept taking gels every 30 minutes. Paul had told me, whether you want to or not, make sure that you take a gel every 30 minutes. At least 2 gels per hour. You're going to get sick of them, but you need the energy, and I had never done onboard nutrition in a marathon. Obviously, we often ran marathons. I often ran marathons without even taking a sip of water, believe it or not. So nutrition on the run was new to me, and I didn't practice it much in training. I would take an occasional gel, but this was going to be a totally different experience, and I actually was fine. I didn't have, other than at mile 14, I didn't have any stomach issues at all, and was making sure to drink plenty of fluid. I carried one handheld, usually in my right hand. The left hand felt okay, but the right hand was typically where I carried the water bottle, and refilled every station, and was well hydrated. Didn't suffer any dehydration issues. Didn't suffer any major soreness issues, and my energy levels were fairly high throughout the race. I went out a little quicker than I should have, obviously, but I remember at the 30-mile point, I was thinking, one more mile, I would have been finished if I had kept in the 50K, but I have a long way to go. So that was the only time I really thought about the extra mileage of that particular switch from the 50K to the 50 mile. Another strange thing happened in probably the middle of the race. I'm running by myself because the field wasn't huge, maybe 100 runners overall in the 50 miler. And I was by myself on a single track section, and I saw a guy coming towards me wearing all camo, very military looking uniform, and carrying an automatic rifle. And it's like, oh my gosh, what in the hell is going on here? And I thought for sure it was the end. Some strange Yahoo is going to shoot me, and I'm going to be dead in the woods, and no one's ever going to find me. And I had no way to go but sort of go right around him, because it was one single track, and he moved to the side a little bit, just looked at me strangely, and I looked at him probably even more strangely, and on I went, occasionally checking back every few feet to make sure he wasn't aiming at me with his rifle. And I started wondering at that point, maybe he's just a hunter, and if he's a hunter, what in the hell is big enough that he needs an automatic rifle to bring down in these woods? And just I won't get into my thoughts on gun control, etc., but I can't see the reason for having such a weapon for whatever you're hunting in that particular part of the woods. So that was kind of a scary experience, and forgot about it pretty soon thereafter, and back on pace. And I remember when I got to single digits in miles, the rest of the race seemed to go by rather quickly. 9:8.765. When I got to the 2 mile to go mark, I picked up the pace a little bit, caught a couple of runners, and actually crossed the finish line in the memorable time of 9 hours, 10 minutes, 11 seconds. 9, 10, 11. Couldn't do that again if I tried. And won the 55 and over category by well over an hour. So all in all, a very successful introduction to ultramarathoning. And I thought, man, I've got this figured out. I am so smart. I paid attention to Paul. I drank well. I did my gels. I got sick of the gels, but I did the gels every 30 minutes and finished the race without a whole lot of soreness. It was definitely a little uncomfortable running 50 miles for the first time. And I'll never forget, I went back to the hotel. Eventually, I couldn't eat after the race. I was just so nauseated from all the gels, so it took me several hours to get an appetite again. I went back to my little hotel. Then I was ravenous. Went for some Mexican food, and I don't know. I may have had an ice cream after that. It's hard to remember everything I had, but I went to bed fairly early, and the next morning I had to catch my flight fairly early, so I got up super early in the morning because, of course, I have to do a run. At least I thought I had to do a run. I was so sore I could barely move, but Kim forced himself to go for a short little shuffle, 2 mile shuffle, just to keep my consecutive days of running going. I was well beyond that 10-year streak from years before, but I did like to run every day, and I always run every day after a marathon, so why not after a 50-miler? Well, during the race, I didn't mention that I started having some issues with my left foot, and I thought it was just a blister. It felt like a blister and kept getting worse and worse, and didn't even look at it until after the race, and there was no blister, but the ball of my foot was extremely sore, and I realized that I had developed a neuroma between the metatarsals, the big toe and the second toe, and running on it that very first day after the 50-miler was a very bad decision. And of course, I ran every day after that. It got worse and worse and worse, and one thing led to another. I ended up getting, after a couple of weeks of that, an issue on my right heel. Left foot was sore, so I was favoring it, and came up with an issue with my bursa in the right heel, and had really badly inflamed bursa sacs in that particular heel, and so I had an injury and kept training with the injury because guess what? I had signed up for the North Face 50-mile championships in San Francisco and was actually on the waiting list, so was hoping to get into that race. Kept training despite the pain, and that'll be another story for another day, but my introduction, at least, to ultra running was successful. That particular 50-mile race gave me confidence that I could, in fact, do this. This sport was not going to be beyond my capabilities. Really enjoyed that, and thanks to the North Face for having a very reasonably priced series. I think the total I paid was around $100. Try doing that anymore for a 50-mile race anywhere in America. Not very many races are that inexpensive these days. So enjoyed my time in Wisconsin. Went back, and of course my kids thought I rocked the world because I'd run 50 miles, and yeah, I was pretty pleased, and haven't been so pleased with many of my other ultra races since then, but that's another story for another day. Good night, America.